Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming. This is an important webinar. This is like really high value information in our opinion, right? That can really help make your statement of purpose be just like on point, which is what we want to make a good first impression to these schools. We are recording and we're going to cover a lot of material, so we might go over time. So I apologize, but we're just going to go ahead and get started here. And I'm going to shoot to have all my material done by 10 to the hour, because then we want to make sure we have some time for Coach Jess to do a value finding exercise with you guys. That's a little bit more interactive. So we're gonna aim for that. So here we go. Theoretically, there we go. Okay, so here are our goals for today. So first of all, what are schools looking for in your essay? How to brainstorm your experiences and know what is relevant there. How to pick a core idea or like a theme of your paper that's kind of running all the way through. We're going to talk about selecting a framework or a structure for your paper, and then kind of talk about how to describe your experiences to get the most bang for your buck, like how to do that properly. And then of course, we'll talk about how to start your paper effectively and how to end it, okay? And then again, if we have time at about 10 to the hour, we will do a value finding exercise, which Coach Jess, okay? So what do schools want? In short, they just want to know who you are, okay? Each seat at a program is a really precious like resource. It's a commodity for the whole field of genetic counseling because it determines who the next generation of genetic counselor is going to be. So they have to have stewardship over those seats and give them to people that they think are most likely to succeed. And Elise, I think some feedback on your end, so sorry about that. We'll just do that. There we go. And what you want to do, what the goal of your paper needs to be, is to present a writing that you feel proud of and that you feel truly represents you, okay? So one of the issues with the prompts is that the schools give you is that they're kind of vague so that people can write a whole bunch of different things and still meet the prompt. But what that ends up being is vague papers tend to come out of that. Okay, that's a very common issue that we see for applicants, is they've technically met the prompts, but they aren't actually showing anything about themselves. And we also see people writing a lot of like what I think they want to hear, right, in your paper. And that's a really good way to not get very many results and not get very many interviews. We want you to have as many interviews as possible, of course, because that is how we make our chances as high as possible. And so authentic papers, like where you can really be genuine and show who you are, garner far more interest and far more like outcomes that are good for you. And really they can compensate for other weaknesses in your application. Like if your grades aren't great, but your paper's on point, they're going to be interested in meeting you, right? If you have another weakness, like you haven't done very much shadowing, you haven't been able to interview very many counselors, but your paper is deeply insightful, they're going to want to meet you, okay? So we can atone for many sins by having a great paper here, okay? So in general, what a school wants to know is really three things. Even if they word it differently, these three things need to be gotten across in your paper somehow. First of all, who you are as a person, okay, your passions, your motivations, how you think, how you learn, how you're able to be present in a situation, like who are you, right? We need to meet you a little bit in this paper. They also want to know why you think you're ready to become a genetic counselor. So are you showing those like critical thinking skills? Are you demonstrating like knowledge and practice of these core genetic counseling values? Like, do you seem teachable, right? Because that's their job, to teach you and mold you into a genetic counselor that's going to be really successful. So are you showing potential for that? And then of course they want to know why you think they're special and why you want to go to their program. Okay, we're going to talk more about that later. But specifically, they want to know why you think that school is a good match for you based on your personality and things that they've that they've already learned about you through your paper. Okay. And here we go, advance. Okay. So in short, about 50% of applicants are cut before interviews. Okay, that's the kind of the national statistic each year. And we don't want that to be you. And it doesn't have to be you. So in the last 2 years that GC Prep's been in business, 100% of people who had some type of coaching before they applied, like on their documents, 100% of those got interviews, and usually to more than half the places they applied to, 90% of those matched. Okay, so there's really powerful data explaining that applying these principles is really effective at getting you noticed and having schools be interested in you. Okay. So let's talk about brainstorming. There's a lot here, but first and foremost, we need to identify your experience. And we have a whole video on the GC Prep website about getting into the nitty-gritty of brainstorming and writing your statement. It's like 45 minutes long. We can't cover all of that here today, but I would point you in the direction of that resource and go step by step with each part of it so that you can really get every drop of insight out of your experiences as possible as you're brainstorming. But first, you're going to want to identify the experiences that have truly made an impact on you. And now looking back, that you can see have been stepping stones to your genetic counseling career. They don't have to be related to genetics. They don't have to be related to anything medical. They can be personal experiences or professional, really anything where you noticed or practiced or now understand the importance of a certain genetic counseling skill or value. Okay, so this could be where you demonstrated like leadership or practice advocacy, or were moving through the grief process yourself or for a family member, or really anything can apply here. And so you need to think broad, but you really want to focus on experiences that you've had that are quite memorable to you. Why are they so memorable? If they happened 10 years ago, what is sticking with you, right? Why is that so formative for you? And you can talk about both successes and failures. If you did something poorly and it went bad, that is a great source of lessons. Like, why did it go poorly? What would you have done differently now that you understand it better? What would have been a better course of action, right? Failures are totally free game to discuss in your papers and are a really good opportunity for growth, okay? If you did have a success and things went well, why? What was your role in that? What did go well? What did you do correctly or that was effective? How did the other person take it? You really want to do a deep dive into these experiences and just think about them from as many angles as possible, okay? You want to ask yourself, now looking back at this experience that I had that at the time had nothing to do with genetic counseling, now with my understanding of genetic counseling and what counselors do and the skills that they use, how was this experience I had relevant, right? If I was grieving the loss of a family member myself and also had to support another family member who was even closer to them in their grieving process, and it was very different for the both of us, what did I learn about that? Did I feel supported? Did I not feel supported? Was that an appropriate experience for me at my age versus the other person? So there's a lot you can learn and reflect on. How did it change your way of thinking? How did it change the way you see the world? What was your emotional process through that experience? Write all of that down and just like journal as much as possible as you brainstorm that, okay? If you did have any directly related experiences to genetic counseling, like if you were a GCA or, you know, for your crisis work, or if you had any advocacy or something like that, make sure that you're spending time with those scenarios and really looking for, how does this relate? If you saw some genetic counseling sessions, did they go well? Because sometimes genetic counselors don't do a good job. We all mess up sometimes, right? So you might have seen a session that was bad. Why did it not go well? If you were the counselor, what would you have done different? If something was particularly successful, why? How did you feel as the observer? What were you seeing the patient go through emotionally? How were they connecting? So you want to have as many observations as possible from these experiences that you've had. Okay. Now, we also want to make sure that we're identifying and defining both your strengths and your weaknesses along with your values. Okay. So some of this comes from self-reflection. Some people are really good at identifying their weaknesses and really bad at identifying their strengths. And some people are the other way around. Okay. So everyone can benefit not only from self-reflection, but getting feedback from other people. Okay. This is not a go ask your frenemy situation. You want to ask people who love you or who respect you or who really know who you are. Those are the best people to ask because they're going to give you true information. And if you think well, I can't ask my mom because she loves me, so of course she's going to say nice things. No, you want to ask people who know you well and love you because they can see things sometimes that we can't, right? So whoever that is, whether it's friends or family, whoever, just get their feedback. Their impressions of you as a person can be really valuable to hear about yourself from another person's point of view. Okay. There's also a variety of tools and assessments that you can use to help you find some of those strengths and weaknesses. And we're going to do a value finding exercise here at the end. Why do that? So it's going to help you articulate, okay, who you are throughout your CV and your personal statement and in interviews. Okay, you have to get across who you are, or else they're not going to give you a seat. Okay, they're not going to give you a seat if they don't know you and what you're about. Okay, and if you don't believe in yourself and that you deserve to be here, why should a school? And spoiler alert, all of you deserve to be here. All of you would probably make really good genetic counselors. Okay, so there's no reason to think that you wouldn't. And when I think of this, because, personally, I have struggled for many decades with self-doubt and kind of minimizing my strengths and thinking my weaknesses are taking over. It's very normal. But that's not a true picture of who I am, right? We have to get to a point where you can accept the good things, the weaknesses. We have to know what we can work on so we can improve. We have to play up the things that we're already good at. Okay. I kind of think of this if you're asking someone for a restaurant recommendation and they're oh yeah, go to this place. It's fine. They've got food and they've got plates and all the things a restaurant normally has. Getting that recommendation to be well, I'm not very interested in going there. That wasn't a very rave review. And we want more specifics, what dish is good? What was the vibe? Are they enthusiastic about a certain place? And so in that example, you're the restaurant. Okay. Some dishes are going to be better than others at a restaurant, just like some people have a different set of strengths and a different set of weaknesses. Some dishes are going to appeal to certain people's tastes and not others, right? Some programs might be looking for a certain strength and weakness profile, kind of going to a certain type of food place, like an Italian place, right? Versus a Mexican place. And other people are just looking for the right ambiance of their restaurant or your general vibe as a human in this example. Okay. So your paper needs to be a genuine reflection of who you are, kind of like a review of yourself and why you think a program should be interested in you. Okay. As you continue brainstorming, think about your future career path. Okay, so no one's going to hold you to any career goal that you write in your paper. You don't have to worry about that. But having a general direction or an aim can be really helpful because it shows that you've thought about what your potential contribution to the genetic counselor space could be and where you see yourself making an impact. It also shows that you have a really good understanding of the skills and values or specialties that are going on in genetic counseling. So it's showing a whole lot of thought processes that you've already done when you can aim, for something in the future. Okay. So that might be a particular specialty. I've had a client who was I love pregnancy. I've always been interested in pregnancy. I want to be a prenatal counselor. And that was their thing, right? So we talked about that in their paper. Other people are super duper into research and they're like, I just love doing it. I want to contribute to the knowledge in the genetic counseling field and write a bunch of papers. Super, also great. Okay. So just, I want to be a genetic counselor, and having that idea stop there is not sufficient. Okay. We need a more complex thought process behind that. And like why, or why that would be important to you, based on specialties or values, or like what aspect you're interested in. Okay. We have videos on our website on all the various specialties and a ton of interviews with counselors who do a bunch of different genetic counseling roles. If you want to explore that a little bit more, it's a great place to get more information and kind of like real world knowledge there. Okay. You also want to talk about your journey to genetic counseling. How'd you find this career? Why are you passionate about it? What are you most interested in about the field? So let's think about these questions and brainstorm how they apply to you. Like, why do you think you're ready for this? And just word vomit as much as you can onto your brainstorm paper. It's not all going to end up in your like essay, but you just want to get as much as possible out of your brain and onto your paper so you can start organizing it and thinking about it. Okay. Okay. Picking a core idea. This is super important. So imagine the reader of your paper getting to the end and they set it down, and then they do this like mental summary of what they've just read in your paper. You want to control what that summary is. Okay. And so this core idea is you're picking a very short and simple concept that you want them to associate with you. Applicant Susie is fill in the blank. Okay. Passionate about blah, 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 or knows how to whatever, right? So it has to be a really simple idea that every time they see your name on a list, or they think about you, or they're discussing you in a meeting, the people who read your paper have this idea. Okay. So this could be a personality trait. It could be a passion. It could be a goal. It could be a skill that you have, whatever. But weaving that from start to finish through your paper will make your essay very coherent and cause like an intentional narrative to happen, which is really appealing for readers who are bored, right? Or tired, right? It makes it a lot easier to follow. So how do you pick this? Okay. We just brainstormed all of that. You just did that. And so now you want to look at which experiences meant the most to you and why. What are the common elements? Did they all have to do with research? Did they all have to do with teaching? Did they all have to do with some type of advocacy? Is there a common element there? Are there emotions or like concepts like social justice, for example, that have motivated you throughout your life, or at least the last several years? Okay. Think about skills that you know genetic counselors have, or values. Are any of those especially important to you? Are there key personality traits that you want to make sure that they know about you? Okay. Getting help from a coach can really help you find that. And that's a lot of what I end up doing with my clients. Is I hear them talk about their experiences, and then usually it's like, so what I'm hearing is that you are this, right? And a lot of the times they end up saying like, oh my gosh, yes, that was what I was trying to get out, and I didn't know how to put it into words. So coaching can be a really great kind of mirror to hold up, to reflect back all your experiences and really clarify what this core idea is. What we don't want to do is be too basic. Like, I want to help people. Of course you do. And that's fine, but we need more, right? Just, I want to help people, period, is not enough. Okay. We need how you're going to do that, why you want to do that. Similar to like, I want to be a genetic counselor because I love genetics. Of course, or you wouldn't be here. So we need something that's more relevant to genetic counseling specifically than could be interpreted as, well, if you love genetics, you could become a geneticist, or you could do genetic research. Why specifically genetic counselor? And then this last example, it's way too long. I'm ready to be a GC because I have blah, 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 blah. It's way too complicated of an idea for them to hold onto and specifically relate back to you every time they see your name. Okay. So what do you do? And these are real examples from the past few years from people who matched, okay? Someone had gone through just a lot in their life, a lot of really challenging experiences, and their core idea was, I can do hard things. I've done them before. Grad school will be hard. I can do hard things, okay? Someone else's was, I know how to have hard conversations, and their paper talked about various challenging conversations that they did well or that they didn't do well, but learned a ton from. And so that was kind of their theme. Someone else was really passionate about medical justice and social justice. Another person was, I'm a grower. And so a lot of her experiences that she was sharing was, I had this weakness and now I'm better, or this was something that I struggled with and now that's a strength, and this is how I learn. And so she really showed her ability to grow and to learn, which was very appealing to schools because they're trying to turn you into something, right? Someone else was, I want to facilitate my patients' choices, right? That was very important to them. So these are very short, simple ideas that can be strung through your paper. And each time these core ideas kind of came about organically when we were just working on discussing what was important to them or what was the most poignant part of all of their experiences. And it just kind of like, it seems like this is what you're telling me. And it really made it easy to string together these concepts and experiences that might have happened years apart in their life, but were related because of this core idea. So the goal is, of course, to find your core idea, not necessarily to copy one of these. If yours ends up being similar to one of these, sure. But we want to make sure it's really authentic to you, okay? So we don't want to try to force one of these examples to fit you if that's not what is really resonating and authentic for your experience, okay? Let's talk about choosing a framework. We got to blow through this one pretty quickly. Again, there's a whole video on this with lots of details about how to like execute this effectively. But basically, this is like a structure for how to put together your paper. And I've suggested 4, though, of course, there are more. We can focus on your strengths, right? So the main discussion of your paper is really highlighting times when your strengths have come out, and we can see how you have demonstrated and really been successful at skills and values that are really applicable for the genetic counseling field. Other people might have a more weakness-focused paper, which is not a bad thing, okay? What we're doing is we're highlighting this weakness, seeing how you address that challenge, right? What you did in the face of that adversity or that lack of skill, and how you grew from it. Okay, so this is really kind of like a reframe into a strength or like a growth demonstration if you choose this like weakness-focused structure. Other people have like a really specific and like pivotal moment in their life that kind of set them down this path that is eventually leading to genetic counseling. So this might have been like a diagnosis for themselves or a loved one, or it could have been a particular moment, an experience where having someone like a genetic counselor or someone with skills of a genetic counselor in their life would have made their experience a lot better. Was it a failure? Was it a success? Was it a diagnosis? Like, what was happening there in that core moment that really changed your trajectory? Okay, and we can structure your paper around that. And then if none of those really appeal to you, all of you should have some type of crisis and or shadowing experience. And so if we're going to focus on that, then we want a lot of the narrative around those experiences to be really introspective. Okay, a lot of insight there. What you learned? How did it change you? How do you view the world differently? What skills did you see the genetic counselor use? How did that make you reflect on what you want to be like as a genetic counselor? How are you going to apply it when you're in school and beyond? Okay, so these are just 4 possible structures to help give you kind of like a skeleton to outline your paper. Okay, describing your experiences. This is a make or break moment. Is really important. Okay, most people, when I read their paper for the first time, are not necessarily doing this to the fullest potential, okay? That's not your fault. That's just, how would you know how to do this unless anyone explains it to you? What we see a lot of is people regurgitating their CV or getting like super into like the details of describing what happened in an experience because they think sharing the facts about that, like what happened, will be impressive to a school. But schools do not really care specifically what the experience was because all of you have different experiences. So what actually went down, they don't care, okay? What we care is what you learned, right? We want to know what your insights were. We want to see your mental and emotional processing of the situation. And so how we do this correctly in describing your experiences is to make sure that you are the main character of every experience that you share. Even if you're just observing the interaction between a genetic counselor and a patient, right? You are still the main character. So I want only enough factual details to give me context to understand what was going on, right? And the majority of it, like 70 to 80% of this paragraph, or, you know, the description of this situation, should be your analysis. So I want, as you're describing it, I want to be behind your eyes. I want to be in your brain. Okay. Like first person point of view. So I want to be reading things like, when this happened, I felt blah, 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 blah. I saw the patient do this. I was wondering if the counselor was thinking this. I realized about myself, or, you know, what was going well or wasn't going well. I wanted blah, blah, blah. Okay. So you need to make sure that you're giving main character energy each time you're in an experience like this, even if you weren't someone who was actively participating to the exchange. Okay. Successes and failures, again, are really great opportunities for analysis. Even if you're sharing something that you did really badly, totally fine, okay? I actually really like to see those because it's a humble acknowledgement that you made a mistake, and it shows a lot of growth, and it shows what you learned, and it shows that you're teachable, right? It's really, really excellent thing to share with a school, okay? As you're discussing what happened in this experience and how you processed it, you want to relate your analysis to that core idea that we came up with before about you, okay? So if you're explaining how you were observing this one genetic counseling session and you were really impressed with how the counselor handled it, and you've identified kind of some of the skills that they were using, and then if your core value or your core idea is like, I don't know, I want to give as much support as possible. Right? Let's say that's your core idea. We would refine that a little bit more, but off the top of my head, let's say I want to be as supportive as possible. You would tie in what you observed from that counselor and your analysis to be like, I saw when the counselor did this, I could see that the patient really opened up. I could see that her whole attitude had changed, and I felt my own anxiety in the situation be relieved because it seemed to be effective, and I had a positive experience because she also had a positive experience, and I want to be someone who can provide that same kind of support to my patients, right? So there at the end, we tied in that core idea. And so each time you share an experience, if you're able to like relate it back to that core idea, then again, there's that super coherent narrative running all the way through your paper. Okay? If you describe your experience effectively, it means you don't have to have like super obvious sentences like, in this way, I have showed my dedication to patient advocacy. If you describe your experience well, we're going to know that you're dedicated. And so you can save on word count, right? You can show a lot of insight and you can save on word count and not have to say something like super obvious like that. Because no one's ever come up to you and be like, hi, I'm a good person, you should trust me. Like immediately we're like side eye, right? Ooh, I don't know about that. So it's more effective to demonstrate these skills and qualities in the way that you're describing your experiences and in like showing what your thought process and emotional process was, is a far better and more effective way of showing them what your value are, showing your dedication to a certain topic than to just state it. Okay. Okay, let's talk about starting and ending your paper with a bang. So starting your paper needs to have a hook. Sometimes your readers, well, always your readers are tired. Sometimes they're bored. They're probably, reading 5 to 10 papers in a sitting. And so if you're paper number 9, you don't have any control over how fresh your reader is. So what you need to be able to do in your paper is stand out and immediately grab their attention again. Okay. So we're not starting, hi, my name is Michaela. I want to apply for a genetic counseling school. Like, no, we're just going to go right into a story. And it can be dramatic, like a dramatic story. It can be something that was especially poignant to you. It can be that pivotal moment that we discussed, if you have one, that changed your trajectory. It could be an especially impactful case for you. It doesn't have to be something super dramatic, okay? If you have a dramatic story, super, but it doesn't have to be that way. Okay, what we're really looking for in this paragraph is to see right out of the gate that you have some critical thinking skills and that you can be introspective. So even a basic story or a basic case up front can be really compelling if you're able to really dig deep and pull out some insight from that engagement. Writing about it, again, from the first person perspective and letting us see your thoughts and feelings in real time as you were in that experience draws us in really effectively and helps get your reader engaged right away for the rest of your paper. Okay. It's also where you're going to introduce your core concept for the first time. And again, we're not doing this as like, the most important thing to me is blah, right? Or my core concept is, we're not doing that. We're just kind of setting up this tone of, like for me, it's education. I love teaching. And so if I were to write a paper now, by the end of my first paragraph, I would have made a pretty strong case for teaching being kind of like the main thing that I am most interested in. Okay. It's also going to set the tone for the rest of your paper. Okay. On the other end, with our final paragraph, that's usually why you're applying to this particular school. So you need to have some reasons. We're not going to use cost and location. Okay. Those are totally fine parameters for why you're applying there. Like, don't get me wrong. Those are really important things. Okay. And so they can totally go into your algorithm of whether you're picking a school to apply to or not, but we're not going to list them in your paper because they're too basic. Okay. What we are going to do is pick aspects of the school that really work well for you and your personality and your needs. And all of that should now make a lot of sense given how much we know about you from the paper we've just read about you. Okay. So what we need to do is pick at least 2 things from each program that are resonating with you. Maybe you went to the open house and really we're like just vibing with the program leadership, right? And felt really supportive. Or maybe that school has a special like cancer focus or extra opportunities and you're really interested in cancer. Or let's say that there's extra research opportunities and that's what you want to do. Or maybe you get to rotate at a certain hospital or clinic that's prestigious and that you're very interested in. Or maybe there are volunteer opportunities for students that are especially appealing, or extra kind of different programming, or maybe it's the class size or the way that they do the curriculum, or whatever. You really have to dig deep into a program's website to see what their things are that they're offering, and then critically think about how that relates to you, right? Some people really love working in groups, which I don't really get. I've always kind of hated group projects, but some people really love it. And so there are schools that do a ton of group work, right? And that's kind of their model. And so if that works for you, then you would pick, I'm especially interested in this like group model of your program because that is how in the past I've seen that I learn best, right? So we're trying to pick aspects of the school. They don't necessarily have to be unique, you know, because a lot of these schools and curriculums look really similar. So it doesn't have to be unique necessarily to that school, but you need to pick things that are especially relevant to you and your needs and your personality, learning style, interests, things like that. Okay. Again, we have a whole video on how to pick schools, and it has a bunch of different criteria beyond cost and location for how to even assess a school and whether you're interested in it. And those same criteria to look for when you're picking schools can also be criteria you're using when you're trying to describe why you're interested in a particular school. Okay. And then usually this is the same paragraph, you know, the most of that last paragraph is about the school, and then you have a final like sentence or two that's just kind of a summary of you, and that's, again, we're gonna end up with that core idea being referenced one more time. Okay. So if we're looking at like a general outline, right, we're gonna have our intro, which is our hook. So we're going to have a story. We're going to introduce that core idea. Then we're going to have a couple of body paragraphs where we're sharing a couple of different experiences and relating those experiences to the core idea. Okay. Then at the end, numbers 5 and 6 there are usually the same paragraph. It's why that one school is right for me. We need at least 2 personalized reasons. And then that conclusion, bring back in that core idea. Okay. As you do this, we want to make sure that you're referencing back to the questions in the prompt for that school and looking to the prompt for any guidance. So some schools might be especially interested in any advocacy work you've done. And so that's how you know, okay, at least 1 or 2 of those experiences I'm describing are going to be related to advocacy. Or some schools might be especially interested in your take on diversity, right? And so you might use, you know, 1 or 2 of those experiences to describe that. And so sometimes the prompt will give you more specific guidance that we kind of aim and choose what experiences we're going to use based on that. And again, as we describe those experiences, main character energy there. Okay, I want a lot. It's going to feel really self-centered. Okay, it's going to feel that way at first, but it has to be that way because they have to get to know you. Okay, I don't really, if I'm a program, I don't really care what happened to patient X, but I care what happened to you, the applicant, in that moment. Okay, so it's going to feel self-centered. It might feel selfish. You got to get over it because that's what they want to read about. Okay. Also, typically, doing all this, you're going to end up with a long paper. It's fine. Okay. Word count is like the last thing we worry about. Okay. We want to get you to a place where you have a paper that's really reflective of who you are, that you're proud of, that feels like really represents you, and that you're really excited to submit to schools. And then when we get to a place where all the content is good, then we start going in and taking care of word count. And sometimes that is pruning some sentences or even sometimes some experiences that aren't adding very much value to the whole narrative. And sometimes it's taking a concept and being like, okay, let's reword this in a more direct way with fewer words, essentially, right? And usually by that point, we can get to a paper that's like 1,200 words, because that's usually kind of the average long ones. And then if you have schools that want like 500 words or something like that, it becomes a lot easier to be like, okay, I'm going to keep my concluding paragraph. I'm going to keep my opening paragraph. And then I'm going to be like really ruthless about what's in between and make sure I'm taking like the meatiest and most impactful parts of kind of the body section of my paper down to that 500 words. So it's a lot easier to break it down into smaller chunks to meet prompts once you have a really solid, like long version of your paper, okay? So let's talk about coaching in general. Coaching essentially is helping you apply everything we just talked about to your paper. So we'll help you pick a core idea. We're going to help you settle on a framework. A lot of the times, at least when I'm doing document review, we end up talking a lot about the actual experiences. And my particular style is I tend to keep asking pointed questions until the applicant starts giving out the type of insight that programs are interested in seeing. And then by that point, once we've done that a couple of times on a couple of experiences, they've learned that skill of how to assess their experiences in that way. And learning that skill now makes your paper great, and it makes when you go to interviews really effective, because they want to see people who've learned to kind of squeeze all that insight out of their experiences. And that's something they're really interested in. We can help you navigate those wildly different word count requirements. We can also give you unbiased feedback, right? You can have your friends and family and professors and other people read your paper. If they're genetic counselors, they might be able to give you advice. If they're not, then they'll give you some advice, may or may not be relevant. Applying to school is very different than applying to a job. So we need some different skills and a little bit different approach than for a job application, for example. And it's in our best interest as a company for you to be as successful as possible, right? So we're essentially on the same team there, and we're going to give you unbiased feedback to try to make your paper great. Your coach is also really your cheerleader, because this is a big emotional process. And those who are first-time applicants might still be excited at this point and, really looking forward to all of this, which is great. And the enthusiasm is wonderful. And then some people who are re-applicants are not feeling that way anymore, right? And there can be significant trauma around not matching the first time that you have to deal with as a reapplicant, just like extra baggage as you're trying to succeed this time. So we can help you, okay? I do not recommend trying to do this all alone. It's really tricky. It's hard to know if you're on the right path. And coaching is a great way to get on and stay on the right path and just receive constant encouragement and guidance, okay? So how to get that? We do document reviews. That can be a single or multiple sessions. There's longer term mentorship if you want like a longer relationship and more detailed relationship with your coach, and also get some of those life coaching skills in there. We've got small groups, which are great for people on a budget or people who kind of want to like spot check individual things. Like I want to attend a small group specifically on CVs, right? That's what I want to focus on. And there's more out there, and that's all on our website. So if you need help deciding what kind of coaching or mentorship is best for you, we have these free like orientation sessions where you and I meet. We talk about how you're coming to this whole application process, what you're worried about, how it's going, and what can best meet your needs for coaching as well as your budget, okay? So there's a link. You can find it if you go to our website and then kind of book online coaching services and book online. Or you can just email me at support@gcprepllc.com. That email goes directly to me. I answer those. And so we can figure something out together. Okay. Guys, we're making good time. Okay, so these were the slides that were potentially on the chopping block if we didn't have enough time. We have about 5 minutes before I'm going to turn it over to Jess. So some do's and don'ts. Okay, in your paper, don't ramble. It'll happen on your first draft. That's okay. But we're going to refine it. Okay, we're going to take out those ramblings later. We're not going to try too hard with words, and we're definitely not going to add fluff. Okay, you have absolutely no room for fluff in your paper. Okay, if you are fluffing it up, you're not doing it right. Okay, and you're missing opportunities, and it's not going to be a successful paper at being compelling. Okay, You want to make sure that you are including at least a couple of like GC buzzwords in your paper. We have a video on that. I'm pretty sure that one's free, that you can kind of watch, and I describe what different terms are and how we use them in genetic counseling and how it relates. So sometimes it puts a term to this idea that you've had but weren't sure what to call it. Okay. We're also not going to get too bogged down in details, the facts of what happened. Again, we want that to be like 20% of the description, and the other 80% we want to be analysis from you, by you, about you. Okay. We're not going to regurgitate the resume or the CV. We're also not going to tell them what we think they want to hear. That won't be successful. They want to hear you. They want to know who you are. Okay. That is their goal. And then finally, we don't want to get too detailed about like deeply traumatic experiences, like a sexual assault, for example. That's too personal. Okay. It's okay if you get into personal experiences, even things that were really upsetting, like the death of a loved one, for example. That it's okay if you're comfortable getting in there and you learned a lot from it and it was a turning point for you, or it was like a really important part of your life and has contributed to who you are as a person. It's okay to get into that. But things that are like experiences that were deeply disturbing, for example, we're going to steer clear of those. Okay. So now onto the do's. Make sure you're looking at the prompts. Okay. Those three things: who are you? Why are you ready? What do you like about our school? Are going to be common to every program, but sometimes there's an additional thing that they want you to add in there. So make sure you're paying attention to that. We want to be mindful of our word limit. Sometimes they will copy and paste your paper and put it into a program that will just cut it off after that word limit. And so if their word limit is like 1,000 words and you've got 1,050, those last 50 words could be lost. Okay. Not all schools do that. Some might have some wiggle room, but you just don't know which ones. So we need to be respectful of that word limit. We also want to look through the lens of a genetic counselor when we're refining our paper or, writing our documents. We're not looking at it from like the lens of, would I fit this job necessarily? We're looking at it from a lens of, do I have these skills? Do I have the humility to learn? Am I teachable? Am I passionate about what someone in a genetic counseling position could provide to patients? Okay. You do want to find a way to make connections with the school that you're applying to. So if there are any open houses, make time to go to those, right? If you have any questions about the school, feel free to email the program director or other individuals who are in charge of fielding those. Okay. Make sure you do a lot of brainstorming. You could have a couple pages of brainstorming. Someone last year, she had like 6 pages. I was like, that's a lot. We're not going to be able to use all that. But it gave us a lot of information to review together, and we picked out what the most valuable parts of that were so that we could make something really coherent for her paper. It's also important to be authentic and sometimes even a little vulnerable. So admitting mistakes and then what you did to improve, right? Sharing your story. Sometimes it's our instinct, especially when we face the possibility of a rejection, like we all do when we're applying to school. There's a possibility that's not going to go well. So sometimes we put up like a wall to protect ourselves from that. So we feel like we need to hide who we really are, present what we think they want, and then build these like security armor around ourselves to protect ourselves in case we don't match, right? It's really important to intentionally peel some of that away. Okay. Whoever you're trying to create to present to them because you think they want it, they don't. They want to see who you are. And sometimes it can be really uncomfortable to show that. But we need to make steps to do that, right? To show some of those good experiences, bad experiences, and describing how you felt, how you emotionally process a situation is really a good way to be vulnerable and open. And essentially what you're doing with that skill is you're developing rapport with the program through paper, right? If they can read your paper and feel like, oh my gosh, I feel like I know what this person wants and I know what's important to them and I know a little bit about who they are, you've already established rapport even before you meet them at your interviews. Okay, that's the goal. Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Jess. She's going to do a value exercise and it's going to be awesome. So I'm going to, Jess, do you want me to click on this this link?
Yeah, yeah, I can drop the link into the chat here.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Michaela. And that last point there, the vulnerability is a great segue into this values exercise here. And the person who I'm a complete fangirl of, Brene Brown, does a great TED Talk on vulnerability, but her values exercise is something that I was trained in, and I used her PDF for this purpose. But so giving full credit to her for this PDF that I just dropped in the chat, and we're going to go through this exercise, which I feel can be very grounding for most of you that might feel lost. And for those of you who have already been through this exercise, because we've done it on in any of the workshops, feel free to hop off if you want to. I think we're still going to do question and answer after this, but we're going to walk you through this values exercise because it is really important to be vulnerable and really kind of like tap into your true authentic self when you're going through this process, because we often fall into this like, well, what do they want to hear? I should be doing this, I should be saying that, they want to hear about this experience. And what they really want to know is who you are. And they're looking for individuals who are motivated to advance the world of genetic counseling profession, but understand why they want to do that. And so these values, everything that we do are driven by our values, our behaviors, our actions, and our motivation as to why we want to do these things. So if you guys don't mind, we're going to jump into this, and this can really kind of set that, that core or those common elements that Michaela was talking about, perhaps throughout the entirety of your personal statement. And it also is helpful with the reflective process, anywhere from the start of the CV resume all the way into the interview process. So if we know our motivations, it's really going to help us write and speak clearly about why you specifically are the perfect fit for becoming a genetic counselor. And so all that to be said, go ahead and open up this exercise here. And we're going to start out with, I know it's kind of overwhelming, but I'm going to put 3 minutes on the clock here. And I want everybody to just go through this list and just identify all the values that you connect with. Don't think about it. And also make note that at the very bottom right-hand corner there's also an opportunity for you to add your own words. But this is a list of just words that in the 3 minutes, just identify all those that you connect with. And this can range anywhere from, 10 to 25 or 30, but don't think about it. Feel free, most of you have your cameras off, but I'm gonna set a timer for the 3 minutes, and everybody just take a moment, identify those, whether you highlight it on the PDF, you write it down, put a checkbox by it, but we'll start the clock now. Okay. So the 3 minutes is up. I typically will ask people what that experience was like for them, but for sake of time, I won't unless you want to drop it into the chat. I know it's kind of hard sometimes to narrow down the list. There's a lot of synonyms and words that match up with each other, but as with our personal statements, there's a lot at the beginning and then we continue to refine. So that's going to be the next step of this. So the next step of this exercise, whether you identified 10 or you identified 30, I would like all of you to organize these values into how they relate to each other. So kind of put them in somewhat of a container per se, you know, and again, as how they relate to each other. So as you continue to refine these values and start recognizing ones that actually really stick out to you. But I'm going to give you a quick example before I put another 3 minutes on the clock. And for example, one of my values is joy. And what falls under joy is travel and family and community. So all of those things kind of fit under that in that same category. So I'm going to put another 3 minutes on the clock. And if you could just take some time to organize those values again into how they somewhat relate to each other. So we'll start now. Okay. So I know this one tends to be sometimes a little bit even more challenging to start putting them into little containers and, you know, boxes per se. And, you know, it can range anywhere from 3 to 5 typically. So again, I would typically ask what that experience was like, but for sake of time, we will go ahead and move on to the last part of this. And so, as I mentioned before, I was hoping that you would take some time to just kind of notice the ones that stick out to you, the values that stick out to you the most. And of those, you know, this is where we're going to go into the process that you are going to identify at least your top 3 core values. And so with that, I'm going to, you know, put a minute on the clock. And this is one that you really don't want to just, don't take too much time thinking about it. It's just kind of one of those things that just comes naturally to you. Words that just feel like I could say this in a sentence. This comes out very naturally. I like to use the word, it vibes with you. Identify those in those kind of categories that you have. And I'm going to put 1 minute on the clock for you guys to be able to do this. Again, don't think too much about it. Just be like, that feels right. This feels right. And you're not confined to that. Of course, all these words are synonyms, but to really be able to talk to them confidently, both in writing and in person, pick those ones that feel and come most natural. So a minute, we'll go on the clock starting now. Okay, the minute is up. So that one was probably, from what I've done in the past, always is probably the most challenging, to just pick one word for each of those categories. But, you know, at the end of the day, those words are truly, if you reflect on every experience that you've had, even outside of genetic counseling, you start looking back, you'll see a common theme as to why your path is the path that you've kind of saved for yourself. And so the last part of this, and not something that you have to do right now, is I like to say is kind of like homework. Take some time to first add a verb to each of these values so you can really see what it looks like in action. And so another example would be one of my values is curiosity. So I like to lead with curiosity. If you're able to put a verb behind it, that's going to be really helpful for you, not only to be able to articulate it in interviews, but on paper. You know, you can use these words and these verbs to really show how you've been learning and growing from your experiences and those insights. So as Michaela was saying earlier, it's really important to demonstrate your skills, to demonstrate your values, to demonstrate your strengths. And so putting that action verb in front of it can be helpful in terms of creating language and writing for your materials that you have. In addition to that, starting this reflective process early is really helpful. And you know, Destiny said this is reflective in itself, and taking that time now to kind of identify those things is really valuable for schools, because it's something that we do. Michaela can probably attest to this, like throughout the entirety of our training, and it's not easily taught, and it comes very challenging for people to be vulnerable. So if you start this process now and you come in equipped with knowing who you are, what you want, what motivates you, and why you're going to make a great genetic counselor with these values that are unique to yourself, something that's invaluable for schools to be able to see. And if you reflect it nicely on paper, then they're going to want to bring you in for an interview to learn more, and it's going to intrigue them. So take the time to, I encourage you to take the time to just sit down and ask yourself these questions about how do your values relate to the genetic counseling profession? How does it relate to the programs that you've selected? And then also your career goals and how you plan on really making a difference in the field. And I want to kind of also make a note that there's sometimes people feel insecure about their main values. And, you know, for example, you know, sometimes it's, you know, being the best. And if being the best is one of your values, that's okay. But think of it holistically. What do you want to be the best in? Well, perhaps you want to be the best in supporting your patient to all degrees with, you know, bridging the gap in barriers to access to genetic testing, or supporting them emotionally. And so, you know, on that note, you know, as we identify these values, I also want to say, like, don't be insecure about what your top values are. There's a way that you can connect them to genetic counseling in a positive light, and also you yourself in a positive light, and try not to get down on yourself for some of the languaging that might come up through this exercise. So that
Thank you.
is all that I have. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Let's see. Go for it.
Okay, so we're gonna do some question and answer. So if you have one, go ahead and plunk it in the chat and we'll get to it. We do have one I want to address here first, and that is like, if your personal experience, which ultimately led you to pivot into the path of genetic counseling, was deeply traumatic, how should you approach talking about it, or should you avoid it completely? There is a degree of judgment, right? So it's up to you whether you want to approach that. If it's something that is super pivotal, I think there are ways to describe your feelings at the time without giving details of specifically what happened if it was really traumatic. So for example, you could be like, there was a point in my life when I was in an extremely dark space because of XYZ, whatever details you're comfortable sharing, right? And it was cold and it was lonely and it was totally without hope, and I had no path forward, and it was a place that I don't want anyone else to have to experience. Being in that place, and now looking back on it, I want to be the type of counselor or provider that can help people move through that time of their life so they don't have to feel stuck there, because I know what that's like. And I want to be someone who can support people through that area of their life and help them come out the other side, right? So that is an example of how you can still reflect on it by focusing on your emotions and how it felt at the time without getting into like the nitty-gritty of the specific traumatic thing that happened to you. Hope that answers that question. If there is more uncertainty there, then again, coaching is a great way to like bounce it off your coach. If you trust them, and we hope that there is a safe space that you can trust a coach to explain, like, this is what happened to me, I want to talk about it, but I don't want to, I want to like balance this, and we can help you work that out if anyone has any experiences like that. Okay. Other questions? If you are a reapplicant, would you recommend speaking to being a reapplicant in your personal statement and what you have learned since the last round of applications? Absolutely. Yep. So if someone has applied and not gotten in, and then are reapplying this time, we need to see growth between then and now. Okay. That is what schools are looking for. So we either want to talk about the new experiences that you've had since applying, or we want to know, not matching was like super shitty. It was the worst. And I felt really bad around then. Sometimes people consider like even just giving up on this whole dream of genetic counseling. Devastated is a common word people use to describe not matching. It's a totally good word. I would also brainstorm more words that describe that, just so we're not in this group of everyone using the word devastated. And then show us how you took that like negative, bad emotion you had around not matching and use that to motivate you moving forward. What have you done differently? How have you really evaluated your experiences? How have you reflected on like not matching, and how has it changed your view of genetic counseling? Has it redoubled your commitment to it? Has it made you reevaluate or made you look for like experiences that are more meaningful and impactful to you as a person than maybe you did the first time? So I would address being a reapplicant in your paper, because it just gives you a lot of options to show how you've grown. Mm-hmm. What would ideally be a concluding sentence, like repeating why I'm a good fit for the program? There's a lot of ways to do it, right? You could go with why you'd be a good fit for that program, like a summary of that. I would go back to that like core idea that you want them to know about yourself and form a sentence around that core idea. So for the one person I had who had been through a lot of like really challenging experiences in her life, her like concluding sentence was, I know graduate school will test me in a lot of different ways, in ways that I don't expect. But because of everything I've been through in my life, I've proven to myself that I can do hard things. And I know that I am ready to learn and take on any challenge that grad school has for me. Right. So that was a good integration of her concept. So those would kind of be my recommendations there. Okay. So Destiny says, in the beginning of the process, I had a fire lit and was actively networking and communicating with GCs and schools. The past few weeks have been hard for me and felt really burnt out. I think you're probably in good company there. It's a lot of people. Now I'm feeling pretty embarrassed to reach back out in my email threads to anyone. Any advice on that? Just do it. Just reach out. Reach out. Do you know how many times genetic counselors have meant to like follow up on something and then like 2 months later we're like, oh shit, I needed to follow up on that? All the time. Okay. People understand, right? So if you are communicating with someone or they've given you any type of advice or they've given you any assistance or whatever, make sure that you're always thanking them for their time, right? Because everybody's busy. If there is like a little gap like this, again, it's understandable. It's totally fine for you to say, I apologize for being MIA there for a little bit. I had some personal things come up, but I'm really thankful for you taking the time with me. And I just wanted to circle back with you, since it has been a valuable relationship for me and I really appreciate the help. And then your question, right? So you don't have to pretend it didn't happen. But things come up, people know that. Okay. Let's see. I've heard some GCs say it's not great to pigeonhole yourself into a specialty, but not be too adamant, certain about your future role or specialty. Any thoughts there? No one's going to hold you to what you put in your paper, right? If you put a certain specialty in your paper, when you graduate, your director's not going to whip it out and be like, well, right here, you said you wanted to be a pediatric genetic counselor and now you're taking a cancer job. Like, what's up with that? That's not going to happen. So it's more about describing why that particular specialty is appealing to you, right? And it's okay to acknowledge, like, I mean, as I learn more about genetic counseling and like practice in school, this could change. But right now, this is what I'm especially passionate about. So I don't think you have to worry too much about like pigeonholing yourself. This is not any type of like contract, but it's just showing the school what is motivating you and what like piquing your interest. So if you're not comfortable with a specialty, then I would focus on like what aspect of genetic counseling you want your job to do, right? So like my job right now is being a laboratory genetic counselor. The laboratory part's fine, but what I'm really excited about my current day job is I get to teach students at one of the programs in one of the classes. And that's the part that I'm really excited about. So like if I were writing a paper, I would be like, I'm not sure what specialty I'll end up in, but I'm really interested in roles where I can be part of this like education process for learners. Yeah.
And I think pigeonholing too would be more, you just don't want to be super direct and be like, prenatal genetic counseling is the only thing that I want to do, and that's the only thing that I'm going to learn, and I don't care about anything else. Like that would be being really adamant about this is the only thing you're going to do. As I think Michaela said, it's just like helpful to show that you are open-minded, understanding that through this process, like things could change, but you have an interest in this specific area.
Yeah. Another question here: if you're straddled between 2 to 3 specialty in terms of interest, should you focus more on your values and strengths instead of talking about the various possible interests? Maybe. I mean, I think it kind of depends on the paper. You could go a couple different ways. There's no right or wrong answer to that. I think sometimes when we have multiple interests, there's usually, like in genetic counseling, there's usually a common denominator, right? Sometimes there is either like a value or a skill or some aspect that can connect some of those things. And so if any of your interests connect in some way by a skill or a value, then point that out, right? Be like, this like aspect is what I'm really interested in. And right now, I don't know if that's going to lead me down like the research path or the cancer path or whatever, but like I'm looking for a role that kind of has this capability for me in the job. Other questions? And I'm going to acknowledge we are 20 minutes like over time, technically. Happy to take any other questions, but no, don't feel required to stay because, again, we've taken more of your time than we said. Okay. Any other thoughts? No? Okay. So thank you guys so much for coming. I really appreciate it. If you have any questions, if you're interested in coaching, if you want to ask something but don't want it in the chat, go ahead and email me, support@gcprepllc.com. You can find a lot of our resources and coaching options and videos and a ton of other information on our website, gcprepllc.com. But thanks so much, you guys, for showing up. Take care.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.